Hey everybody, I'm the Drink Pro. Today we're doing a lineup of Blood Oath, Pack 4, 5, and 6. Hey everybody, Drink Pro here. Thank you so much for joining me. Please continue liking and subscribing. I'm trying to do everything I can to give you guys the best experience possible, and that is the best way you can help me outside of joining my Patreon or supporting me with samples. So thank you all so much for all of your help, and let's keep this channel going, guys. Today, we're trying Blood Oath, and we're trying 3 different versions. Blood Oath is a regular release where they do different blends of whiskeys, which they do not disclose. Not really a fan of that aspect, but it's kind of fun that they're creating these blends one time and then never doing them again. I think that's the catch, that's the gimmick, and not all gimmicks are bad. I should be clear, I use the word gimmick and that has a negative connotation, but if you like what they're doing, if the flavor profile is good, who cares if it's gimmicky? Now, Blood Oath is a product coming out of the Lux Row Distilleries in Bardstown, and John Rempe, I think that's how you say it, R-E-M-P-E. John Rempe is the master distiller there, and he's worked with a lot of these blends to create blends that he finds interesting. And every time, especially in these modern versions, he'll take 3 different whiskeys, blend them together, and then finish them in a different kind of barrel. Now with Pact 4, he aged the blended product in a toasted barrel. In Act 5, he aged the finished product in a Caribbean Rum cask, and in Act 6, he used a Cognac cask. So all of these are finished in different ways, which should affect the flavor. But you gotta remember, this is all being blended by the same person. There's a specific kind of flavor profile that's being sought after again and again using different techniques. These are more variations on a theme than radically different products, even though they present with this mystique of like, we're only doing this blend once and then never again. That's not really what they're doing from a profile perspective. That's what they're doing from a product perspective. So let's go ahead and pour these out. Now, I've tried to do this review once before, which is why I only have half a sample of Blood Oath Pact 4. The audio didn't record. Go figure. Technology doesn't always like me, but I do what I can. Now, one thing about the Blood Oath products is they come in these big wooden boxes. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of cool. Booker's does it. I get the coolness factor of it, but I don't know. I don't like it as well as the Booker's boxes. It's not as cool for me. Now notice that I've drank most of this Pact 5. I've had this open for a while, so it's going to be a little bit more mellow probably than if it was just open today. This is Pact 6. I should say shout out to Sean Crane for letting me borrow the bottle and do a sample of Pact 6, and then shout out to Dan Kidd at Heavy Bourbon on Instagram for the Pact 4 sample. Just looking at the bottles that I've got in front of me, I will say kudos to Lux Row for adding some transparency. The Pact 5 does not give the year statements for any of the whiskeys in the blend. It just says that one of them is an extra aged mahogany bourbon, one is a wheated mash bill, and the third is a younger whiskey. So they don't give you a lot of information, but Pact 6 gives you specific year statements. If you look it up online, you can find out what's in these different bottles, but I like seeing the fact that Pact 6 has it right there on the label, even if it's a little difficult to read. Pact 4 is a 12-year, a 10-year, and a 9-year whiskey, all aged in a toasted barrel. Pact 5 is 13-year, 11-year, and an 8-year, all blended together and aged in a rum cask. Pact 6 is actually stated on the bottle, a 14-year, an 8-year, and a 7-year, all aged in a Cognac cask. So all of these kind of follow the same process. They're all older and younger whiskeys blended together and then aged in different kinds of barrels. So let's go ahead and nose each of these products and then taste each of these products. And I'll try to give you some information of side-by-sides instead of going through each individual one and going too deep on any one of them. One other thing I should add before we get started on this is that all of the Blood Oath products are 98.6 proof, kind of a play on the name blood. That's the temperature in Fahrenheit of blood. You get it. So let's go ahead and nose each of these. First, I'm going to start with the 4. I get a lot of sweet aromatics, a little bit of that cereal note, definitely some caramel, definitely some vanilla. There's a little bit of spearmint, a little bit of the sort of cinnamon spice, but they're pretty subtle. You know, with a toasted oak, I would expect a little bit more of a woodiness or even a chocolatiness. There's a hint of chocolate, there's maybe a hint of nuttiness, but it's very subdued. It's very far back in the palate. The sweet aromatics are the most prominent thing. Very classic bourbon notes are just very prominent on this pour. I get a hint of grain as well, and then there's some fruit in there. There's almost like a cherry cough syrup note in this. That sort of medicinal cherry with a little bit of pear. I'll come back to that in a minute, but as I leave it in the glass, I start to notice more and more of this chocolate note, which is kind of what I was expecting. For some reason, I get that a lot on these toasted oaks. Let's try Pact 5. This is the one I own and I've had many times. The nose on this Pact 5 is much, much quieter to me, and I think that's part of the reason. This bottle is almost empty. I've had it open a long time. A lot of the notes have kind of dissipated. But if I just jam my nose in there, I notice it's a lot sweeter, it's not as creamy, and it's actually woodier. I get a lot more wood notes, which is, again, ironic because the toasted oak, I would expect more woodiness to come through. I get more of a honey quality, and that might be from the rum. The sweetness is sort of bumped up a little bit on this. I don't get the cereal grain. I don't get the fruitiness, really. This is a much more narrow nose. It's sort of a honeyed sweetness with a little bit of that wood, that fresh cut oak. There's still a spearmint quality, and there's also a nuttiness to this. I would say an almond. But the notes are a lot stronger. It's just there are fewer of them. Let's go ahead and nose Pact 6. Now, Pact 6 is the Cognac Cask, and you can definitely smell that on the nose. The cognac comes through. It's definitely my favorite nose of the three. The cognac reminds me a little bit of the Belle Meade Cognac Cask, which is a positive thing. I like that pour. This one I get a really sugary sweetness, almost like artificial breakfast syrup, maybe some maple syrup too. There's a maple quality to this. And the berry notes are the most prominent of the three in Pact 6. I'm getting a bit of a raspberry, a bit of a strawberry, a cherry for sure. Lots of dark fruit notes. And then there's also this sort of lemon high citrus note as well. Almost like a hi-hat. Ooh, I actually get a bit of a peanutty quality. Just a little, just a subtle peanut note in Pact 6 here. That nuttiness is interesting. As I kind of smell it over and over again, I'm starting to get this brown sugar, chocolate, cinnamon. This dessertiness is really starting to show up. Okay, now I'm going to taste them very quickly back to back to back. And then I'll go through and give more individual notes. But I really want to see just quick, rapid fire what my initial first impressions are of these pours. That woody, chocolatey kind of note. It's like cacao. It's not like a sweetened chocolate. That chocolatey note definitely shows up on Pact 4. Oh, and it lingers for a while, too. That bitterness really sticks around. Okay, Pact 5. The rum is pretty subtle in Pact 5. I get a little bit more of almost like a rye spice. There's a definite graininess that I smelled in 4 but didn't taste. I taste it in 5. And the finish has sort of a nuttiness, whereas the finish with Pact 4 is this chocolate bitterness. Pact 5, it's sort of sweet and nutty. Let's go to 6. By far, the most prominent impact on the whiskey is coming out of 6. That is very cognac forward. It's got that sweet, dark fruit. Into the mid-palate, you get some sweetness, you get some honey almost. Yeah, see, the finish has this sort of chocolatey bitterness as well. That's interesting. The only one I didn't have that chocolatey bitterness from was Pact 5, which is the one that's been open the longest. I've had the longest. Maybe that's something that mellows out of the pour as you get further and further away from the opening date. I think number 6 is my favorite of the three, but all of them still kind of have something I'm missing maybe for me. But let me go through them again and just give them another shot just to find out what I can pull from these pours. Number 4. Very cereal forward right off the bat. It's the first thing you taste. Immediately it goes to the wood. You go cereal right into this woodiness, this bitterness, this bitter chocolatey note, hints of nuttiness. There's really no fruit in this whatsoever. There's none of that fruity characteristic, which I really liked from 5 and 6. Oh yeah, there's this honey sweetness right off the bat too. It's just all malty sweetness and honey sweetness. And then very quickly into this, a little bit of heat, but then very quickly into that woodiness. Man, the toasted oak is so prominent on that pour. And it's got a long aftertaste. In terms of finish, it's the longest on number 4, I think. I may revisit that, but right now it lingers with this black pepper and this nuttiness and this bitter cocoa. It's like a walnut nuttiness. Pact 5 again. This is Caribbean Rum Cask finish. I'm really surprised it's not sweeter. I get a lot of bitterness out of this one, especially on the finish. More bitterness than the toasted oak, which is already quite bitter, because I think it's such a contrast. The toasted oak, it just comes right out of the gate. You get the sweetness, but then right in with the oak, and it stays oaky, and it stays bitter, and it just lingers on. It's really uniform in the experience, except for that one hiccup at the start. Number 5, there's a lot going on in the middle, but it's all kind of murky and muddled and not super clear. But then the finish just comes at you with this bitterness that is throwing me off. I'm thinking number 5 is just, this was a mistake to taste number 5 this late in the game. I think number 5 just needs to be bottled, killed, and forgotten about. I remember when I first tasted it, it had a lot of rum in it, and that's just all gone now. That may be indicative of how these other Blood Oath pours act when you leave them open for a while. They may not be at their best when they've been open. Some whiskeys get better as they're open and opening up. Some whiskeys get worse. This might get worse. I get a little bit of raw cinnamon, maybe a little bit of coffee, but it's very, very subtle. A bit of nuttiness in the mid-palate, a bit of woodiness on the finish. The bitterness, though, is just very prominent for me. I do not care for that pour. I gotta be honest with you guys. And that's my bottle. That tells me that this has gotten significantly worse. It wasn't my favorite whiskey in the world when I first bought it, but it's not gotten better with time. Number 6. When I first went in on number 6 doing quick rapid-fire tasting, the dark fruit just stood out. It continues to stand out. It's meaningfully different than 4 and 5 in a good way. If you like, a cognac finish. If you don't like cognac, you're not going to like this, because the cognac is relatively present. Now, I do think this may have been the most recently opened bottle, and so that may really speak to the quality degradation in each of these pours. I think that says if you get one of these pours, I would drink it fast. Nothing wrong with that, but it's good to know which whiskeys get better with time and which ones do not. Yeah, I think all the notes I gave in my rapid fire session really still apply. Number 6 has this beautiful sweetness that I love, this fruitiness right off the bat, but then it just disappears. Yeah, you get some nuttiness and some black pepper in the mid palate, but then very quickly goes away. Well, that's a difficult situation because I like long finishes sometimes, but when a long finish is not a good flavor, I don't really want it. And bitterness isn't always a good flavor for me. I think of these 3, Pact 4 is probably my favorite because it's really notable and powerful and prominent doing this one thing really well. And I don't always want that flavor, but if I want it, getting it that prominently is really cool. Whereas number 5 and number 6, they're blended, they're doing different things, but number 5, first off, in this presentation, I think number 5 may have been open for too long, so I'm trying to kind of discount my review of number 5 in this instance. But number 6 is relatively recently opened, and to me, it's just missing a finish. If number 4 is all finish, number 6 is no finish, and if I have to pick one, the sweetness of number 4 at the beginning is the reason that I go with it. Because if it was nothing and then finish, I wouldn't like it at all. But instead, it gives me this sweetness and then immediately turns into that bitter, nutty, wonderful barrel note. Now, here's the kind of rubber meeting the road. These bottles typically sell for $100. I don't think any of these pours are worth $100. If you can find these for $60, $70, I would probably buy them, but that's not the price point they sell at, especially on the secondary market. They do go for a little bit more than $100. It's just not my thing. I think if you like a balanced whiskey and you don't want anything too difficult and too challenging, these are going to be really good for you. Every one of these was relatively straightforward. It was doing one kind of thing. I got more of a journey with number 6, but it just stopped. The journey was all at the front of the palate. So, you know what? All of my complaints about these pours might be remedied if I mix them all together. Let's do it. Cheers. That's the best thing I've tasted all day. So if you want to try these pours, buy all 3 of them and then mix them together. No, but they really are. These are whiskeys that are trying to do one thing. They're blended to be creating sort of narrow experiences. And when I blend them together, I feel like I get sort of a combo of those experiences. Now, I think if I let this sit and age for a while, it might kind of mesh together and I wouldn't have such clear divisions in the flavors and the experiences. That's usually what happens when you have whiskeys that you take and you blend together. But because my biggest complaint about these whiskeys was how narrow and singular they were, putting them all together really makes a wonderful pour. So that's informative for you, I hope. You hope you think about what you're looking for when you pour your next dram. And in the meantime, I'm going to keep drinking like a professional. Cheers, guys.